So now we'll start the class. So in the previous lecture, we have seen uh, how the air enters in our lungs. What is the different path through which air enters in our lungs? And I told you at that time that how the blood vessels absorb oxygen in alveoli, and I told you at the same time that alveoli is the site through which the oxygen will be consumed, or oxygen will be trapped by the hemoglobin of our RBC, and from there the oxygen will be trapped and will be transported to different organs and distributed. So here we had to start from here, steps involved in respiration. So respiration is a step-by-step process. So we will see what are those steps. In book, 5 steps have been given through which we can explain the whole process of this respiration. So the first step is inhalation of air up to alveoli. So what happens? We know that during respiration, first step is inhalation. So what happens? We inhale the air. Okay. So when we inhale the air through, so I told you through different parts of our respiratory system, it ultimately reaches to the alveoli. And exhalation of the air with carbon dioxide from the alveoli. I told you that exhalation from the same alveoli takes place, and due to this exhalation, whatever air we have taken in will be thrown out of our lungs. So from the exhaled air, carbon dioxide will be removed from our lungs. Okay, so here it has been written that exhalation of the air with carbon dioxide from alveoli to outside of the environment. So what happens? Whatever carbon dioxide has been produced by our tissue will be transported from the blood to the alveoli, and from alveoli, due to exhalation process, the carbon dioxide with the air will be exhaled from our lungs. Now the second step, diffusion of oxygen from alveoli to blood and carbon dioxide from blood to alveoli. So what happens when air enters into alveoli? Then along with the air, some amount of oxygen is there. So I told you that blood vessels are there along with this alveoli. So those blood vessels are having the blood, and the blood is having RBC, and RBC is having the hemoglobin. So hemoglobin traps oxygen. So what happens? Hemoglobin in alveoli, they will trap the oxygen and they will transport the oxygen. Here it has been written diffusion of oxygen from the alveoli. So alveoli, I told you, it is a bag-like structure. In this bag-like structure, whatever air is there along with the oxygen will be filled. And I told you that within the alveoli, blood vessels are there. So what will happen? Oxygen will diffuse from the bag-like structure, or the space in the alveoli to the tissue, and from the tissue it will reach to the blood vessel, and from there the blood vessel will trap the oxygen, and here the carbon dioxide from blood to alveoli. So what happens? Whatever carbon dioxide has been transported from your tissue and cells of your body will be transported from the blood to the blood vessel, and that blood vessel will in that blood vessel carbon dioxide will be there, and that carbon dioxide will be diffused from your blood vessel to the alveoli. So here the second step has been said, and I'll show you the same process here with this figure. You can understand. You just see this one. By this figure, you can understand this statement. What happens? You just see oxygen reaches. This one is the alveoli, this one is the alveoli, and this one is the blood vessel. So what happens? Air enters in this alveoli by inspiration, and oxygen reaches here, and this oxygen, by the process of diffusion, enters into this blood vessel. And as you know that our cells are consuming this oxygen and oxidizes food to produce ATP, and as a result carbon dioxide will be produced. So here you just see carbon dioxide also reaches here in the same blood vessel, and this carbon dioxide diffuses from this blood vessel to the alveoli. So this exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide takes place from alveoli to blood vessel, and from blood vessel to alveoli. Oxygen is transported from this vacant space to the blood vessel, and from blood vessel carbon dioxide diffuses from this blood vessel to the alveoli space. So this happens at the at this site. So this site, you just see at this site two things are there. One is alveoli, which is the part of lung, and this one is the blood vessel. So this is called as primary site. Okay, so here the sentence is stating the same thing, the second step. Okay, the third step, transport of gases by blood. So you know that blood transports a lot of things along with the gases. Okay, so blood not only it transports gases, it also transports the nutrient material, the essential materials of the cells like hormones. It also transports the nutritious materials like glucose, amino acid, protein, whatever things which are necessary for the cell, it will be transported from the blood only. And whatever waste materials are produced by the cells, which would be harmful to our cells, will also be transported from our blood vessels and the blood to different excretory parts, and ultimately the waste materials will be excreted out from our body. So what is the main function of the blood? The main function of the blood is transportation of different materials, and transportation of gases is one of them. So here transport of gases takes place. It means what happens in blood vessel, when oxygen reaches, then it has to be transported to different organs or tissues, and from tissues carbon dioxide will be transported from the different organs to the alveoli. So here after that, after diffusion process, transportation of gases takes place. Now the next step is diffusion of carbon dioxide and oxygen from tissue to blood and blood to tissue. So here this fourth step is stating about this one. I'll show you the figure, this one. The secondary side. On secondary side, what happens? You just see this blood vessel transports oxygen to different cells and tissues of different organs. So suppose this one is the cell of any organ. So this cell ultimately requires oxygen. So what will happen? You just see here oxygen has been diffused from this alveoli to blood vessel. From this blood vessel, blood will transport this oxygen to this site. You just see this oxygen is here in this vessel, and this oxygen will be diffused in this tissue because this cell requires oxygen. I told you before, in cellular respiration, oxygen will be consumed for the oxidation of food in order to produce ATP or energy coin. So each and every cell requires oxygen all the time. So what happens? This blood vessel, the same blood vessel will the same blood vessel will reach to different tissues, and through blood this oxygen will be transported. You just see here oxygen reaches to different tissues, and this particular position, this particular site will be called as secondary site. Okay, so what happens here? Oxygen reaches to this site, and from this blood vessel oxygen will be diffused into the cell, and when it diffuses, then this oxygen will be consumed by this cell to produce ATP. And you know what happens here? Due to cellular respiration, the food will be oxidized, and the oxidized food will produce ATP, and as a result, carbon dioxide will be produced. So here, production in this cell, consumption of oxygen takes place and production of carbon dioxide takes place. Okay. So here, carbon dioxide will be produced, and this carbon dioxide will be transported into the blood vessel. You just see here again the exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide takes place. Like the same, you just see from alveoli to blood vessel, the same happens with this blood vessel to this tissue or cell of any of the organ. So here you just see oxygen is there. So this oxygen will diffuse in this cell, and this cell consumes oxygen to oxidize the food, and carbon dioxide will be produced, and this carbon dioxide will again move in this in this vessel, and you know that again when it reaches this carbon dioxide in this vessel, then the same blood will transport this carbon dioxide to the primary site, and from here the carbon dioxide will be transported back in the alveoli, and from this alveoli by exhalation process the carbon dioxide will be removed from our lungs. So this, you just see two sides are there, okay, and in between primary and secondary side I told you that blood is transporting the oxygen and carbon dioxide. Blood is transporting oxygen from this vessel to, from primary side to secondary side, and the same blood transport carbon dioxide from secondary side to primary side. So this transportation of oxygen from alveoli, so ultimately we can say that the blood is transporting oxygen from alveoli to the tissue. You just see oxygen has been taken up from the alveoli and it has been transported to the tissue. And ultimately what happens with the carbon dioxide? Carbon dioxide produced in this cell or the tissue will be transported in the alveoli. Okay, so all these processes are taking place under the process of respiration. We will discuss the whole thing later also. Okay, so now we'll see the fifth step. Okay, utilization of oxygen by cells for oxidation of food, and this oxidation of food is coming under catabolic process and the release of carbon dioxide as a result of this process. So what happens? You know that if any of the biomolecule is being oxidized or is being broken, then this process is called as catabolic process. And here, due to this catabolic process, ATP is produced. So here, the fifth step is stating nothing but just this process here. Here food is there, and the food is oxidized, and here carbon dioxide is produced, and the main thing for which the food as well as oxygen has been consumed in the cell is the production of ATP. So here all the 5 steps are stating here. Here, in the lungs, alveoli are there. In this alveoli, oxygen will be taken up and carbon dioxide will be expelled out, and this process is called external respiration. Here, in this, from this alveoli, blood will transport the oxygen from this alveoli to different cells or tissues of the organ, and here carbon dioxide will be produced, and this carbon dioxide will be transported from the blood to the alveoli, and from here, from the alveoli, carbon dioxide will be expelled out. And this process, this particular process from alveoli to tissues or organ, or the lungs to organ or tissues or the cells, is called internal respiration, I told you. And the last step which I told is stating this one here. When oxygen reaches to the cell, then it oxidizes the food, and after oxidation of this food, ATP will be produced. And here the oxygen has been utilized. You just see here oxygen has been transported in this tissue now. So here oxygen will be oxidized, oxygen will be used in the oxidation process of the food, and carbon dioxide will be produced. And here the produced carbon dioxide will be transported in the lungs. So all these processes are taking place in respiration process in human being. Now we'll see mechanism of breathing. Okay, so what is the meaning of breathing? Breathing is a mechanical process in which what we are doing, we are inhaling air and exhaling the air. During inhalation, what we need to have maximum amount of oxygen to consume the oxygen. And for the process of exhalation, what we are doing, we are expelling out carbon dioxide. We have used, I told you that oxygen will be used for the oxidation of food. As a result, carbon dioxide will be produced. So carbon dioxide along with the air will be expelled out from our body. So both of these processes will be called as breathing. So breathing is different and respiration is different. Respiration is the whole process of different steps, including breathing also. So breathing, we can say breathing is one of the part of respiration. So in another way, we can say that breathing is a mechanical part. breathing is a mechanical process of our respiratory system. So here it involves two steps. Okay, so the whole breathing process, whole of this mechanical process involves two steps. First is called inspiration or inhalation. Both are the same. And here the second step is called expiration or exhalation. So I told you what is the meaning of inspiration. When we are inhaling the air into our lungs, this is called as inspiration. And when we are exhaling or expelling out the air from our lungs, this is called as expiration. Now we'll see how this inspiration and expiration takes place, or inhalation or exhalation takes place. Okay, so something has been written here. To understand the same thing, we will see first this figure. Okay, by this figure we will understand completely that how we are inhaling the air and how we are exhaling the air. Okay, so here you just see both of these pink structures are representing the lungs, and these are the ribs, and the same is also here. So during inhalation process, what happens, you know, below the below the lungs, this diaphragm is there. Okay, I told you that our body is divided into two chambers, thoracic chamber and abdominal chamber. Okay, and this division takes place by a membrane. This membrane is called diaphragm. You just see this is a dome shaped structure, diaphragm. Okay, and I told you this one also, as the position, when we were talking about the position of, or the situation of this lung, I told you that on dorsal side we are having the ribs, on ventral side we are having the sternum, and on lateral side we are having the ribs. Okay, and in between these ribs some muscles are there. Okay, so what happens during inhalation and exhalation, the movement of this diaphragm takes place, and the expansion and contraction of these ribs are taking place. Due to this expansion and contraction of these ribs and contraction and relaxation of diaphragm muscles, exhalation and inhalation takes place. Okay, so by seeing both of these pictures, you can completely understand how this inhalation and exhalation takes place. You just see during inhalation process, what happens, you just see that expansion of ribs or ribs cage is taking place. So what happens during inhalation, when we are inhaling the air, then passively we are inhaling the air. By what? By expansion of the rib cage and contraction of this diaphragm muscles. Okay, when contraction of this diaphragm muscle takes place, then what will happen, this diaphragm membrane will be pulled on downside. You just see diaphragm contracts, or one diaphragm contracts, then what will happen, this diaphragm moves in downward direction. Okay, and the muscles of these ribs will relax. Then what will happen, this the ribs will become the expanded position. Due to this expansion, what will happen here in this chamber, and a vacuum will be created. Due to creation of this vacuum, what will happen, the air enters passively into our lungs. So by this process inhalation takes place. And what happens after that, due to inhalation, when air reaches in our lungs, and ultimately I told you before that oxygen reaches to ultimately to the terminal point of our lungs, that is called alveoli. From alveoli, what happens, the blood vessels will will take up the oxygen, and after taking oxygen, the oxygen will be transported to different organs or tissues, and after that carbon dioxide has to be expelled out of our body. So what will happen at that time, so the carbon dioxide has been produced and it will be transported to the alveoli, and here this carbon dioxide will reach to the to the vacant space within the alveoli, and after that what will happen? This contracted muscles of this diaphragm becomes relaxed, and due to this relaxation, what will happen, this diaphragm moves to upward side. So if this diaphragm moves up, you just see here, this due to relaxation of this diaphragm muscles, the diaphragm moves up, and when diaphragm moves up, and here you just see the ribs will come uh, in their original position. Then what will happen? A pressure will be created within the thoracic cage, and due to this pressure, whatever air we have taken in our lungs will be pushed. Due to this pressure, due to this positive pressure, whatever air we have drawn in our lungs will be pushed out, and this is called as exhalation. So we have seen how inhalation and exhalation takes place. So we will understand the same thing here also. Inspiration. So what step by step processes are taking place in this inhalation process? We will see here the contraction of diaphragm. I told you the diaphragm is a dome shaped structure. It divides thoracic cavity as well as abdominal cavity. So it is a dome shaped structure. So due to contraction of diaphragm, what will happen? The diaphragm moves downward. So the contraction of diaphragm and some sets of external and internal costal muscles. These muscles are present in between the ribs. So here two types of muscles are there: external and internal intercostal muscles. Okay. So here, external and internal costal muscles and ribs helps in increment of volume of the thoracic chamber. Okay, so what happens? The diaphragm moves in downward direction, and the ribs is expanding. Due to expansion of this ribs cage and movement of diaphragm on downward side, what will happen? The volume of the thoracic chamber increases. Okay, which causes here it has been written, the volume of the thoracic chamber increases. Increment of volume of thoracic chamber takes place, which causes the increase in pulmonary volume also. So what happens when a negative pressure will be created due to expansion of this thoracic chamber? What will happen? The negative pressure will be created, and due to this negative pressure, the pulmonary, whenever you will see the term pulmonary, it means we are talking about lungs. So increase in pulmonary volume. So when when the volume of this ribs cage increases, then the volume of this pulmonary system also increases. Okay, the volume of this lungs also increases, and it is the result of this process. Intrapulmonary pressure decreases. I told you na ki a vacuum will be created. And what is the meaning of vacuum? Vacuum is the negative pressure. So due to this expansion, you just see that suppose this one is the chamber and this chamber is increasing, then what will happen? Due to increment of the volume, the pressure present within the chamber will be decreased, and a negative pressure will be created, or we can say ultimately a vacuum will be created as compared to the atmospheric pressure. A vacuum is created. You just see it has been written. As a result, the air is forced to move from outside to inside the lungs. So by this process, what happens? As compared to atmospheric pressure, as compared to outside, the within the lungs chamber, the pressure will become negative, or vacuum will be created, and due to this vacuum, air will move from outside to inside the lungs through nostrils. Okay, so by this process, inspiration takes place. We used to fill our lungs by this process, inspiration. Now what happens for the expiration process? The reverse process takes place. When the diaphragm and intercostal muscle relax, so whatever changes has been taken place in inspiration process, the reverse will happen here. So what happens here? Previously, the diaphragm muscles were contracted. Now the diaphragm muscles will become relaxed. Previously, the volume of the ribs cage was increasing. Now the volume of ribs cage will decrease, and here the diaphragm as well as intercostal muscle relax. So here intercostal muscle will relax, and due to this relaxation, what will happen? The ribs will come in their original position. So previously the original position was the contracted position, so it will come in contracted position. Okay, then both of them return to their normal position. I told you, diaphragm as well as the ribs will come in their normal position, which reduces the thoracic volume. So whatever expansion has been taking place, whatever increment of the volume lungs will be decreased. Okay, then thereby volume, as a result of above process, the interpulmonary pressure increases. So what will happen here? The pressure will become positive. Previously the pressure was negative, a vacuum was created, but after relaxation of the diaphragm as well as the intercostal muscle, when they will come in the normal position, the volume will be decreased, and due to decreased volume, a positive pressure will be created. Okay, and due to this positive pressure, what will happen? Whatever air has been taken up in our lungs will be expelled out. Okay, so here, as compared to atmospheric air, a positive pressure will be created in our lungs, and due to this positive pressure, expiration of air takes place from our lungs to the outer environment. So whatever air we have drawn in our lungs will be expelled out. Okay, now some facts are there, you will have to remember those. On average, healthy adult human breathes 12 to 16 times per minute. You will have to remember this number. So, an average human being, average adult healthy human being, uh, 12 to 16 times this breathing takes place per minute. So per minute, inhalation and exhalation both takes place 12 to 16 times per minute. Okay. Now, number of breathing per minute and the volume of air inspired and expired can be calculated by using spirometer. So an instrument is there using which we can count the rate of inspiration and expiration. A respirometer is an instrument in COVID condition also. The same instrument we are using to count the inspiration and expiration process. When COVID happens, you know that it affects the lungs. Then due to the infection in the lungs, the proper inspiration and expiration is not taking place. And by this respirometer, not only it counts the number of expiration and expiration per minute, it also measures the volume of air inspired and expired. So by the increased or decreased amount of volume of air during expiration and inspiration, we can calculate that the the person's lungs are healthy or is in disease condition. So respirometer is a very much important instrument using which we can calculate the number of breathing per minute as well as the volume inhaled and exhaled also. So you will have to remember the name of this instrument. Okay. Now we'll see some data. Okay. So here, respiratory volume and capacities. So based on different mechanism, we used to have a particular data which is associated with inspiration and expiration volume of the air. So here first is the tidal volume. Okay, this is also in short is called as TD. Okay, so this tidal volume is generally 500 ml. And what is the meaning of this tidal volume? Volume of air inspired and expired during normal conditions. So during normal condition, some of the volume of air we are inhaling and exhaling. So the moreover it is around 500 ml. So it is called as tidal volume. Tidal volume is what we are inhaling and exhaling in normal condition. So whatever volume we are inhaling and whatever volume we are exhaling is called tidal volume, and it generally uh, approximately around 500 ml. Now, the another important capacity, respiratory capacity is respiratory reserve volume, IRV. Okay, so here additional volume of air a person can inspire by forceful inspiration. So I told you the normal inspiration and expiration volume, when normally we are inhaling and exhaling, then it will be around 500 ml. But if we are forcefully inspiring, means if we are inhaling air forcefully, then some amount, some extra amount of air we can inhale, and that additional volume will be called as inspiratory reserve volume, and it ranges from 2.5 liter to 3 liter, or 2500 ml to 3000 ml. Okay, so the additional volume of air a person can inspire by a forceful inspiration. So normally we are breathing, but when we are forcefully inhaling, है ना, then some extra volume of air as compared to the normal volume, this tidal volume, we can inhale. So this inhalation and this volume will be called as inspiratory reserve volume, and we need to remember the range here. It ranges from 2.5 liter to 3 liter, and the normal in normal condition 0.5 liter of the air we can inhale and exhale, but for the by the process of forceful inspiration, then we can inhale extra amount of air. Okay, that is called as inspiratory reserve volume. Now, expiratory reserve volume is what? It will be more or like inspiratory reserve volume. So, by forceful exhalation, whatever amount of air we are expelling out from our lungs will be called as expiratory reserve volume, and it will be somewhat less as compared to inspiratory reserve volume, because as compared to inhalation we can exhale very much less amount of air by the forceful expiration. So here it is around 1.1 liter. Okay, so additional volume of the air a person can expire by forceful expiration. So forcefully, if we are expiring, if we are trying to remove some of the extra air from our lungs, then it will be called as expiratory reserve volume, and it is around 1.1 liter, or 1100 ml. Okay, now the residual volume. Okay, the residual volume, by the name we can understand, this will be some amount of air which is present in in the rest of the volume. Okay, so here volume of the air remaining in lungs even after forceful expiration. So what happens when we are forcefully exhaling the air, then some of the amount remains, some of the volume of the air remains in our lungs. That remains amount of volume of air will be called as residual volume. Means whatever amount of air is left behind after forceful expiration, means not all the air we can exhale by the forceful expiration. Some of the amount of air remains in our lungs. That remains amount of air in our lungs after forceful expiration will be called as residual volume. What is the rest behind volume of rest behind volume of air in our lungs will be called as the residual volume, and it ranges from 1.1 liter to 1.2 liter. Now, inspiratory capacity. Okay, so here inspiratory capacity is a combination of tidal volume plus inspiratory reserve volume. So when we are adding both of these, means by this by it is the total volume of air a person can expire normally, as well as the extra inspiratory volume. Both will be combined together, and here a term will be used that is called as inspiratory capacity. It means what is the capacity of a person through which who can inhale the air, the normal air, along with the forceful inspiratory air. So both will be combined and it will become inspiratory capacity. And what is the expiratory capacity? The normal one as well as the extra one. है ना? By forceful expiration we have exhaled some amount of air. So both of these, means tidal volume as well as expiratory reserve volume, will be combined together and it will become expiratory capacity. So all these volumes you will have to remember, and you will have to remember the data